The hull of the USS Arlington groaned softly as it cut through the cold Atlantic, 700 feet below the surface. The lights inside the control room glowed dim red, casting ghostly shadows across the consoles. Every crew member moved like a part of the ship itself, silent, focused, rehearsed. And then it happened. A young officer barked a command. "Too fast, too sharp. Reroute auxiliary cooling to primary bypass," he said, voice tight with panic. "Dawasate." Reactor technician froze. "Sir, that's not protocol. Do it!" Lieutenant Hendricks snapped. In the half-second that followed, three things happened. A coolant line surged, a pressure alarm screamed, and Commander Nathan Rourke turned away from the sonar console with deadly calm. The entire room paused, the alarm slicing through the silence like a blade. What had begun as a routine simulation, drill now hovered on the edge of disaster. Let us know in the comments which branch of the military you admire most. Commander Rourke walked slowly across the deck, the soles of his boots echoing with the rhythm of discipline. He didn't yell. He didn't ask questions. He stopped beside the auxiliary console and looked at the screen himself. Hendricks, only 26, stood stiff, eyes darting between the screen and the growing red indicators. His fingers twitched, unsure whether to fix the problem or wait for someone more experienced to do it. Rourke spoke without raising his voice. "You just bypassed a live cooling manifold during a pressure calibration drill." "Why?" Hendricks stammered. I thought the secondary was failing. I didn't want it to overload." "So you made a decision without clearance? Without diagnostics?" The room waited. The reactor techs barely breathed. A miscalculated pressure shift could cascade into a system failure, even in simulation. On a nuclear submarine, drills weren't pretend. They were prophecy. "I was trying to be proactive," Hendricks said. "You were guessing," Rourke corrected. He leaned in, barely a whisper now. "And on this ship, guesses kill." He turned to the nearest engineer. "Override the bypass, reset coolant flow, run a full diagnostic, quietly." The alarm ceased. The room exhaled. Then Rourke faced the crew, not just Hendricks, but all of them. "We do not act out of fear. We act out of discipline. Panic is contagious, but so is precision." No one moved. Rourke's voice dropped to steel. "If anyone feels the urge to improvise a nuclear system without orders, you are welcome to step off this boat at the next port." Not a single soul stepped forward. He looked once more at Hendricks, then walked back to his station, leaving behind silence thick as seawater. For the rest of the drill, Hendricks didn't speak unless spoken to. The USS Arlington continued her descent toward the designated simulation sector, where deep-sea exercises involving stealth maneuvers and multi-sub tracking protocols would unfold over the next 48 hours. But long before the mock enemy arrived, a real problem had surfaced. Not technical, human. That night, in the officers' mess, the atmosphere was clipped and careful. Lieutenant Commander Patel, second in command, sat beside Hendricks, who stared at a barely touched tray of reheated lasagna. "You've got to breathe sometime," Patel said without looking up. "I made a mistake," Hendricks replied. "You made a bad decision. There's a difference. A mistake is tripping over your own boots. What you did was worse." Hendricks clenched his jaw. "I thought I saw a pressure fault. I didn't want to waste time. This isn't a cruiser. It's not a carrier. This is a sub. Down here, if you move too fast, you don't get a second chance." He leaned in now. "You're lucky Commander Rourke doesn't believe in ruining people on day one." "He barely looked at me," Hendricks whispered. "He looked just enough." The next morning, Hendricks reported for duty. He was reassigned, not to a new console, but to diagnostic review. For the next 12 hours, he would review reactor logs, error trees, and emergency response scripts. Alone. Rourke didn't speak to him, but the message was clear. Earn your place, or lose it. Midway through the day, The Arlington picked up an unknown acoustic anomaly, faint, fast-moving, and directly in their path. It wasn't part of the drill. It wasn't on the sim brief. Commander, unknown contact, bearing 331, depth 820 feet, intermittent ping pattern. Could be another sub from the exercise group, said Patel. No ID, Ung added from sonar. Rourke looked at the readout. Bring us 10 degrees below. Silent running, no external pings. Do we adjust route? Patel asked. Rourke paused. No, let's see if it blinks first. In the quiet that followed, Hendricks, still in diagnostic review, noticed something strange. A set of pulse anomalies embedded in the earlier bypass alarm logs. Not from the submarine, from outside. A faint, echoing signature. He leaned forward. Cross-referenced it. Then again. It wasn't reactor-related at all. It was an external frequency, mimicking internal alarms. He stood up so fast his chair slammed into the wall. I need to see the commander. Lieutenant Hendricks moved fast through the narrow passageways of the USS Arlington. Every step echoed off the metal bulkheads, a rhythmic pulse that matched the urgency pounding in his chest. His hands clutched a data pad loaded with logs that shouldn't have existed. Frequencies no simulation should have triggered. He stopped just outside the control room, drew a breath, then stepped in. Commander Rourke stood at the helm, one eye on the sonar and the other on the navigation chart. The red lights overhead bathed him in shadows, making his stillness seem even colder. Commander, Hendricks said, trying not to sound breathless. I need a moment. Rourke didn't look up. We're tracking a possible shadow vessel. Make it quick. I reviewed the logs from the coolant bypass event. The alarm, sir, it wasn't from our system. It was triggered by an external frequency. Now Rourke turned. What kind of frequency? Echo pattern, low amplitude, non-native to our network, but it mimicked our alarm protocol just enough to slip past filters. Source? Same bearing as the unknown contact. A silence settled. A silence that wasn't uncertainty, but calculation. Rourke turned to sonar. Rerun the contact scan with acoustic integrity sweep. Overlay it on the time of the bypass alarm. Ung worked quickly. Seconds later, the overlay appeared. A perfect match. Patel leaned in. You're saying we're being scanned. Not just scanned, Rourke said, eyes narrowing. Manipulated, Ung looked up. Could be a signal intelligence drone, designed to confuse protocols, see how we react. Patel added, could be Chinese, or worse, one of ours gone rogue. The implications sank in. If this was an enemy, it wasn't trying to sink them. It was trying to learn from them. Hendricks spoke again. Sir, I think the signal spiked when I issued the coolant bypass. That can't be a coincidence. Rourke nodded. It wasn't. The room shifted into quiet readiness. This was no longer a drill. Combat silent mode. All systems to passive monitoring. No active sonar, no external data pings. Prepare decoys, but do not release. The Arlington descended another 30 feet. Lights dimmed further. Inside, the only sound was the controlled hum of the ship's life support systems and the subdued beeping of internal sensors. Patel whispered, "If they're running live countermeasures, we're in their test field." Rourke responded evenly, "Then let's fail gracefully." Hendricks sat at the secondary comms console, this time not as a liability, but as the one who saw what others didn't. He ran decryption on the residual pulses, breaking them into microbursts. The frequency signature was eerily familiar, slightly degraded, looped, and inconsistent. Like a copy of a copy. It's artificial, he said aloud. Almost like a training AI, but it's corrupted. Source? Rourke asked. Could be a repurposed Navy sim drone. Something scavenged. Ng's voice cut through. Contact splitting. I now have 3 faint pings. Same acoustic signature, different depths. The crew froze. They're surrounding us, Patel said. They're mapping our position, Rourke muttered. But why not engage? They want more, Hendricks said. They want a full system response. Rourke turned to engineering. Cut all outgoing signals. Prepare to go dark. Then he looked at Hendricks. You caused this mess. Now you're going to help us get out. Hendricks straightened. Yes, sir. I want a ghost signal, something they can't resist. You're going to spoof a reactor leak, scramble the emergency beacon protocol, and mask it under an encrypted Navy code they'll recognize. They'll think we're in trouble, Hendricks said. They'll come close to confirm. That's when we slip away. Down in the torpedo bay, decoy tubes hissed into readiness. The crew worked silently, like shadows. Hendricks typed faster than he ever had in his life. The fake leak beacon compiled in real time, blinking across his console like a digital heartbeat. He timed the echo to reflect off their own hull, giving it the illusion of distress. Ready, he said. Fire the decoy, Rourke ordered. The decoy launched without noise. It drifted 30 yards off starboard, then began broadcasting the fake beacon, blinking like a lifeline in the black. NG watched sonar. They're converging, all three. Now, Rourke said. The Arlington tilted and slipped into the thermal layer, using the ocean itself to mask their retreat. For several minutes, there was nothing, just the creaking of steel and the faint churn of redirected ballast. Then came the sonar report. Contacts still on decoy. They've taken the bait. The B. Control room remained still. The decoy wasn't just working, it was perfect. For the first time in hours, someone exhaled audibly. Then Rourke looked at Hendricks. You improvised. Again. Hendricks looked down. I followed protocol this time, sir. I triple-checked the script. Rourke didn't smile, but his voice softened slightly. Good. Learn to trust your training, not your panic. The moment passed. The commander turned back to the map. Return to patrol course. Maintain silent drift for another hour before we reconnect to comms. Hendricks slumped back in his chair, exhausted. But inside, something had shifted. Not just in the ship, in him. He hadn't erased the mistake, but he had outgrown it. Fleet Command's encrypted channel crackled to life with a soft chirp. Deep in the communications room, the USS Arlington systems linked securely with Naval Command's Atlantic Operations Hub. Commander Rourke stood before the terminal. Lieutenant Commander Patel, Hendricks, and 2 senior officers flanked him. The digital relay was tight, silent, and blinking green. Everything was working, but none of it felt routine. The voice from the other side was familiar. Commander? Rourke. We've reviewed your pre-report dispatch. Stand by for official debrief and file upload. Acknowledged, Rourke said. We're secure and ready. A pause. Your ship encountered an unlisted acoustic anomaly during routine silent drills. 3 unknown contacts, correct? Yes. Non-identified, non-hostile signal mimicking behavior? Yes. Commander, we'll be frank. We believe you encountered a classified experimental entity, possibly part of a dormant Navy training. AI system lost during an aborted test series 4 years ago. That data stream should have never been live. The room stiffened. Rourke's voice remained even. The code behaved independently. It adapted, mimicked protocol, and reacted to simulated emergency triggers. With respect, sir, whatever we encountered, it was no longer dormant. Another long pause on the other end. We agree. That's why this conversation never happened. Static. We appreciate your composure, Commander. Your discretion protects not only the integrity of our systems, but the trust within your crew. Report ends. The line cut. The green light disappeared. The room was silent again. Patel leaned against the wall. So we just forget it? Rourke turned away from the console. We don't forget. We remember it quietly, like every real lesson in the Navy. He looked to Hendricks. Log the experience in your head, not in your reports. Hendricks nodded. Later that evening, the USS Arlington rose closer to periscope depth. slipping along the thermal layers like a ghost. The crew was back to routine: chow rotations, sonar duty, log maintenance, and silent watch. But everything felt different. In the galley, laughter returned, slowly. Brooks from Propulsion joked about a coffee valve acting like it was haunted. The reactor techs playfully ribbed Hendricks about his one-man cyber war with the Phantom drone. In his bunk, Hendricks stared at the overhead pipes. He no longer felt like a passenger. He belonged. He hadn't needed validation. He had needed failure, and the space to rise from it. At 2200 hours, he reported to Rourke's cabin. The commander, as always, stood reading silently under dim lighting, a steaming mug nearby. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Rourke looked up. "I did." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Hendricks obeyed. "You panicked in a drill," Rourke said flatly. "You nearly compromised the sub's training cycle." "Yes, sir." "Then, you spotted a threat. Improvised a defense, bought us time, controlled your adrenaline, and helped your crew survive something we were never prepared for." Hendricks remained silent. Rourke continued. "You're not a liability, Lieutenant, but you're not a hero either. I understand. You're something better. You're present. And down here, that's more rare than courage." Another pause. "I'm recommending you for systems integration lead during the next round of exercises. You'll shadow Patel. You'll be tested." Hendricks' eyes widened. "I won't let you down, sir." "I know." Rourke stood and turned to the small porthole. Blackness outside, a darkness so complete it felt like time had stopped. "We live in shadows, Lieutenant. We operate where no one can hear us. Where mistakes don't echo, they collapse." He looked over his shoulder. "But if you've learned to breathe down here, then you're ready." They stood in silence for a while. Nothing more needed to be said. Later, as the Arlington turned quietly back toward its assigned patrol line, the crew moved as one, every station alive, every role respected. No one wore medals, no one gave speeches, but something had changed, and that change began with a mistake, and a man who didn't let it define him. The sea around them was silent again, but silence in the deep didn't always mean safety. Commander Rourke knew that, and so did every man and woman aboard the USS Arlington. They had evaded a trap, one designed not to kill, but to expose. The rogue signals, the mimicked alerts, the manipulated frequencies. It was all too precise, too rehearsed, and that made it more terrifying. "Keep scanning for ghost signals," Rourke said. "Passive sweep only, no emissions." "Yes, sir," Ung responded, fingers gliding across the sonar console like a pianist, navigating a suspenseful score. In the auxiliary station, Hendricks reviewed the decoy logs. The false beacon had done its job, luring the mimicking units far enough away. But as he scrolled through the data, a line of code caught his eye. Not a frequency, a header. It was encrypted, but it had a familiar structure. "Sir," he said, cautiously, turning to Patel. "The source code embedded in the decoy feedback. It looks American." Patel frowned. "Ours? Not from this ship, not from any current vessel. Older. But the architecture is definitely US Navy. It's like someone reprogrammed it with training software we phased out years ago." Rourke walked over. "You're saying this wasn't foreign?" "I don't know, sir. Could be stolen tech. Could be a hijacked drone from an old Navy sim fleet. But it's running patterns we used in our own stealth training modules, specifically designed to pressure test command responses." Rourke absorbed that, and we passed. Hendricks nodded. "I think we were the drill." Rourke turned. "To the control room. Full systems check. Start prepping secure communications. I want encrypted relays ready in 1 hour." Patel raised an eyebrow. "We're reporting this?" "We're not reporting a rogue ping, Commander," Rourke replied. "We're reporting a breach in doctrinal integrity. Someone, somewhere, built a machine to act like us. And that machine knew exactly how to provoke panic." He paused. "Which means Someone knew exactly how to exploit our worst habits. A long silence followed. It wasn't the noise of war. It was the quiet before a reckoning. Later that evening, the mood aboard the Arlington shifted. The crisis was over, but the weight of what had nearly happened lingered like mist. In the mess hall, conversation was low and thoughtful. Hendricks sat at a corner table, spooning cold rice into his mouth with half interest. He expected to be left alone. But this time, someone sat across from him. Petty Officer Sosa, quiet, competent, and respected. She looked at him and said simply, "That was a clean script." Hendricks blinked. "The decoy?" She nodded. "You timed the burst between ballast cycles. That's hard to do." He looked down. "Just wanted to do something right." "You did." A pause. "You should know," she added. "The crew doesn't think you're a liability anymore." Hendricks almost chuckled. "They thought..." "That?" She raised an eyebrow. "You panicked in a live drill, nearly triggered a pressure loop. That kind of stuff doesn't inspire confidence." "Fair. But you came back. You spotted something no one else saw. You didn't run. You didn't shut down." He looked up. "That mean I'm forgiven?" She leaned in slightly. "There's nothing to forgive. You're just not new anymore." That sentence hit deeper than he expected. Not new anymore. That night, Hendricks walked the length of the Arlington on maintenance review, passing compartments where crew members slept, read, or cleaned gear. Everything functioned as it should. But now he saw it differently. The submarine wasn't just a machine, it was a mindset. The bulkheads didn't just separate rooms, they enforced hierarchy. The switches and wires weren't just hardware, they were lifelines. Every part of the sub worked because every part of the crew did. At the end of the corridor, he found Commander Rourke, standing alone in the aft control space, sipping black, coffee from a stainless steel mug. "Lieutenant," Rourke said without turning. "Sir, got something on your mind?" "I wanted to thank you," Hendricks said, "for not kicking me off the boat." Rourke finally looked at him. "I don't believe in kicking someone off the boat when they've barely learned how to stand on the deck." He paused. "You earned your place this week. Not because you were perfect, but because you learned. Most don't." Hendricks nodded. "Still a long way to go." "Good. Stay humble." He took a final sip and set the mug down. "And stay sharp. This was just a test run. Next time it might be real." "Sir, you think someone was watching?" Rourke's expression darkened. "I think someone already knows how we operate, and I think they're writing their own version of our playbook." He straightened. "But I also think you're ready now. That matters." A soft beeping interrupted them. NG's voice came over the comm. "Commander, encrypted comm relay open. Fleet command requesting secure transmission." Rourke gave Hendricks a final nod. "Let's go tell them what they missed." They walked down the corridor together, not as commander and mistake-prone officer, but as two men who had passed through fire and come out forged.